Hello, it's Alex. Welcome back to my channel. I'm here as always to talk about sewing. Thank you very much for joining me. Absolutely everybody, whether you're somebody who's just found me or somebody who's been with me from the day one. Really appreciate each and every one of you. And this video is kind of a follow on from my Friday sews video, because I said I was just about to make the Maynard dress from Elbe Textiles. If you don't know the pattern, it's a zero waist pattern and it's got quite an unconventional shape. It has a kind of folded wrap at the front and asymmetric hems. It's one that I had made a good couple of years ago and I've been dying to make again. So I've got a few tips along the way. Some of them may come from what I've learned from making my own mistakes, but a few tips along the way and a bit of a pattern review. On Friday's video I asked you if you might help me make the decision about which fabric to make this out of. Really liked that linear fabric, but I knew it wasn't right for this time of year. It's January and freezing cold here in the UK. I know lots of you across the world and some of you in lovely warm climates. But here it's cold. So really it was fundamentally down to either the wine coloured fabric or the brown coloured fabric. And really lots of you responded, which is so appreciated. I was kind of hoping there'd be an emphatic response, an emphatic yay or nay, but there really wasn't. It was around about 50-50. So in the end I thought, no, I'll go with the wine coloured fabric. I came up here to my sewing room and I had a look at it and I realised that it wasn't going to work straight away. And that's going to bring me to my first tip. This is the fabric. I noticed that on my camera it was a bit I guess because of the dots, and that was partly the reason. It was one of those, I looked at it and thought that is already making my eyes go a bit funny working with it. I'm sure I could get over it, but this is the wrong side of this fabric, and tip number one is make sure you choose a fabric that you can mark easily and that you're going to be able to read your markings on. This is not going to work. As I've said, it's a very unconventional pattern, which is what I really like about it. It's also an unconventional pattern in terms of its construction. It means that marks and notches and information is really, really important to the construction of this dress, and you need to have a fabric that you can more or less write on. It needs to be very clear. It's no good to just do snips in the seam allowances like you normally would do. You can do that, but you definitely need to mark. So a fabric like this is going to be very, very difficult to use. So that's tip number one. So I realised this wasn't going to work, and therefore I was going to make it out of the brown fabric, and that's why I'm dressed like a mime artist, so that I can put it on and take it off. So I made it out of the brown fabric with the little flock men on, and I also seriously considered, can you hear the dogs? I also seriously considered making the spring version in the linear fabric, and I've decided not to go ahead and do that, and there's a good reason, and it applies to both of these, and it's tip number two, which is choose a fabric that's dual-sided or doesn't have a wrong side. And that's because when you're wearing it, because it's a wrap over and it has sort of open hems, they are tending to fold over, which means that when those hems are folding over, you're getting a view of the wrong side. So it's kind of doing that kind of thing. Now, I know that that's not the end of the world. It's not fashion crime of the season, but I kind of think the nice thing about making your own clothes is that you don't have to put up with, that's a bit extreme, but you don't have to deal with those kind of things. It would be so much nicer if it was the same on both sides, or at least had some kind of pattern or something that looked intentional. This is a zero waste pattern, and by zero waste what that means is that when you cut the pattern out, there are no wasted bits of fabric at the sides, and most of us that sew do our absolute best to minimise that amount of wastage. I certainly very rarely, we're going to ignore that, I certainly very rarely go by lay plans on any patterns that I use. We all try to squeeze as much pattern into the fabric, don't we? But with a zero waste pattern, there's none. It's completely eliminated, which means obviously it's much better for the environment, less wastage. So what happens with this is that now I used the PDF, so when you compile your PDF and you tape all your pattern pieces together, you just have one huge pattern piece. It is sort of contained in a box, so there's a kind of margin of paper around the edges that does need to be trimmed off. But once you've trimmed that, you place that entire sheet over your fabric. And the way it works is that you run the pattern sheet selvage to selvage on your fabric, and you fold your fabric over. So there's a point in the pattern that says place on fold. It's in the diagrams and the instructions, and that goes over the entire piece of fabric. And that is going to bring me to tip number 3, which is the one that I didn't do, and that's why I'm telling you. The instructions tell you when you fold your fabric to fold it wrong side to wrong side. Therefore, you've got your good side or the right side of the fabric outside, immediately next to your pattern on the top layer. Now, I thought, why would you do that? I know better than that. I want to be able to do all my markings through the pattern, and 9 times out of 10 it doesn't really matter too much which way round you put your pattern on top of your fabric, whether it's folded right sides together or wrong sides together. So I ignored that. What that has meant is that my dress folds over the wrong way. So most ladies' things fold right over left, but that's not right on my version. I've got it going left over right. Now, it doesn't really matter. The only person that's really going to notice that is me, and possibly the odd eagle-eyed person who sews out there. But if you want to do it properly, don't do what I did. Follow the instructions and make sure that you fold your fabric wrong side to wrong side. You see, even now I'm having to think about it. So because you're dealing with a very large pattern piece and you're also dealing with a large piece of fabric, it can be quite unwieldy. What I did was that I pinned the entire fabric, the entire pattern onto the fabric around the edges once I'd got it all smoothed, and I made sure that the fold line of the pattern was definitely on the fold line of my fabric, pinned it all around the edges, and then rolled it up and just sort of took it section by section, and it became a lot easier to deal with. And that's even bearing in mind I've got a bit of a cutting surface. If you're doing it at home on a dining table, it could be a bit tricky. In fact, it's probably a good one to do on the floor. I probably should have done that. That might have been a bit easier. With this pattern, what you're doing is you're actually cutting through the pattern piece and through, in most cases, through both layers of the fabric. So it's unusual really, isn't it? We're not used to cutting through our paper. And because I did mine as PDF, I was using sort of bog standard printer paper. Made me feel a bit nervous using my, I used my rotary cutter. I've actually got a good rotary cutter and a cheapo one, and I'll be honest, I used my cheapo one just because I was being probably a little bit precious about cutting through paper. But there's not much you can do with this. You've just got to accept you're going to cut through paper. So as I said, in most cases you're cutting through both layers. You literally just follow all the outlines, making sure to keep the fold intact. And there is one exception to that, and that is, in order to create the front, you've got a front piece with a grown-on godé and a front piece that doesn't have that. So my next tip is to make sure you know your right from your left. What you need to know is, don't make the same mistake I made. Your right front is the narrower of the two front pieces. The left front is the one that includes the godé. So as long as you stick to that, double check the instructions, you'll be fine. So this narrower piece is the right, and this, ignore mine because it's on the left and it's wrong, and this piece here, which comes out at an angle, is, or should be, on the left. Cut everything out. You've made sure that that one cutting line, you've only gone through the top layer, but the rest of them you go through all the layers. Because you've cut it with the wrong sides together, you've been unable to mark your fabric. So what you have to do is one by one, turn your fabric the wrong side out, realign it with its pattern piece, which will now be detached, and get every single marking on there, and that's really important. The instructions suggest that you have a ruler, and I certainly did that. There are stitching lines, which are the ones that are dashed. You need to draw those in. You need to make sure with your two front pieces that you're only putting on the relevant marks. So you're only putting the right hand pieces on the right piece and the left markings on the left piece. They are really, really essential. But more than anything, my next tip is to make sure that all your marks are a good 4 to 5 centimetre out from the side edge. So if they're along a side seam, every side seam is going to be turned over double and hemmed. So there's no point just having a little notch, and there's no point having, you know, little 1 centimetre or even a 1 inch mark, a chalk mark. You need to do a nice long line about that big, and if the marking has a number next to it, write that number on, which is why just using some fabric like the wine fabric, it's going to be really hard to see if you're actually writing letters on there. It's important. You know, there's a variety of marking methods, aren't there? I really like the pens that you iron out, but on a faint or a pale colour fabric, they can still show. So obviously you need to be careful. But yeah, mark all the lines really thoroughly, but make sure they've got their corresponding letters next to them. And while we're talking about marking, my other tip is to make sure that you spot the mark for the godé on the back piece. It's on the fold line, so it's right on the edge of the pattern piece. It's on the fold, and the very first instruction you're going to have for construction is to cut up that line. So you need to draw a line from the godé marking down to the hem of the back piece. Draw that in because it's right on the edge, it's very easy to miss, so don't miss the godé line. So now we're on to the construction, and my next tip is probably not going to be a popular one. You really do need to do a toile. I am not a fan of doing a toile. I am way too impatient. I very rarely do them. I might do one if I was using a very expensive fabric or a pattern company I hadn't used before, or something that was very fitted. But this, as I said, it is an unconventional construction because it's zero waste. And the very first thing that you're asked to do is to create this inverted pleat in the back. The instructions do say that there's a bit of leeway there, and if you have a broad back you could reduce down the width of that pleat or eliminate it altogether. I took about 1 centimetre off, so in effect 2 centimetres off, based on what I remembered from having made it before. And in my case that did work. But later on, when you get to the instructions further along, there's also an option to add some extra fabric, because whilst it may fit and you can pin it and go, oh yeah, that fits fine, you may find there's some restriction of movement across the top and across your shoulders. And there's a way to give yourself some extra fabric to give you that range of movement. So really, I do honestly think, as much as I hate doing toiles, this is one that you really should toile. Once you get into the construction, the instructions are good. They give you all the information you need. But my tip here really is to take it slowly and make sure that you are really spending the time to take on board everything that's required, so that you don't do daft things like I did. You just need to follow it step by step to the letter. Literally to the letter, because some of the folds are fold notch G to notch H, that kind of thing. But so long as you've marked up your fabric really nice and clearly, you'll be fine. It comes together really quite easily actually. The thing that's unusual about it is the double folding of your hems. So normally you construct your seams, you know, right side to right side. If you're lucky enough to have an overlocker, you'll, you know, finish your seams with an overlocker or maybe with a zigzag, press it, move on to the next seam. In this case, you're not doing that. You might have some folds to create or a pleat to create, and then every single edge is double folded and hemmed. And then when you come to construct, your two front pieces overlap the back piece, so the two hems overlap, and then you follow the stitching line. So this fabric has been overlapped along this fabric. It's been double hemmed. So although I'm used to sewing in the conventional way, and it felt at the time like it was a bit of a pain having to double fold all edges of each pattern piece, once the pattern pieces were placed on top, overlapped and top stitched down, all of a sudden the entire thing was finished. So it was really nice not to have that kind of annoying thing where you think, oh, I finished it now, and then you go, oh, I've got a hem to do. It's all done for you because obviously the hems are not all lined up, you know, they're all at different angles, and yeah, it means it just comes together really nicely. However, my next tip in regard to all that double turning up of hems is to take note of the instructions and either stay stitch or add some stabiliser to those hems, specifically, most importantly, the ones that are at angles, because they're on a bias. It's very, very easy for that fabric to stretch, and then you're going to get that kind of horrible ripply effect. So for mine, I did stay stitching. In effect, what I did was I sewed with a slightly larger stitch length all the way around the pattern piece, just shy of 1 centimetre, because it's a centimetre fold. Then that A became my stay stitching, but B, it kind of became my guide to turn the hem over. So I used that to turn it, press it, and then turn it again, and then top stitch it all the way around. If you don't want to stay stitch, then you could use interfacing. If you've got this stuff, which I bought this just on eBay. This is interfacing just on a roll. I think I've got some in white somewhere as well. And you know, that's probably a bit more than 1 centimetre, but it's not really going to matter. I would just add that to the seam allowances right up to the edge of the seam, iron that on, use that as my guide to turn over and turn over again and top stitch. So yeah, you don't really want to risk stretching out any of those edges that are on the bias, because it's quite hard to come back from that. And those really are my main tips. Overall, I still very much like the design of the dress. I wonder whether I could possibly go down a size. I'm not sure. I need to kind of wear it for a little bit and see how I feel. One thing I'm not sure about though is the collars. When I made my last one, I actually removed the collars because I just didn't like how they were. But I thought I'd give it a go this time. Just, you know, sometimes your taste changes, doesn't it? But I'm just not convinced. I'm not sure whether it's because they're they're not attached around the back, so they're loose. So I'm not sure if it's that's kind of bugging me. And maybe I need to just find the sort of optimum position for the fold and put a couple of stitches, you know, from the inside so that you can't see them. Whether they're just not me, I'm not sure. I'm going to wear it for a little bit, but I have a strong suspicion that I'm actually going to end up taking them off again. I'm not sure. That's my only niggle, and really that is just a personal preference. But in terms of the design, I do like it very, very much. I like the kind of the wrap effect and all the folds. I like the overall silhouette, and I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I really like designs that are a little bit, yeah, a bit more unusual. I particularly like the hem, the asymmetric hem. And the other thing I absolutely love about it is how versatile it is as a design. I mean, obviously I'm wearing it over, you know, long sleeve t-shirt and tights today, and in the summer, you know, it's dead easy to wear in the summer as well. And I like that about a sewing pattern, that you can wear all year round. I suspect I'll make myself a linen one in the summer. But yeah, that's it from me for today. I will be back on Friday with another Friday Sews. I've had some deliveries, so I've got some things to show you and to talk about. And yeah, in the meantime, look after yourselves, stay safe, and thank you for watching. Bye bye.